Have you noticed Saquon Barkley's not going to be franchise tagged? Have you noticed Josh Jacobs not going to be franchise tagged? Have you noticed Derrick Henry's not going to be franchise tagged? Have you noticed Austin Eckler's not going to be franchise tagged? You notice these things? Huh. Really interesting, isn't it? All the timing that it all comes out within a week. Look, here's the thing we've said about running backs. You know, the players were worried about collusion. They're meeting and deciding all of our fate. So what did the players do? They actually had a meeting to try to decide their fate as well. We see your collusion, we match it with our own collusion. And the reality is, when NFL owners talk, I'm guessing they're smarter now, whether they're using disappearing apps or more than likely actually having verbal conversations. They can also kind of read each other and read the room, and there's a way in which you cannot violate collusion clauses while still relatively colluding. But this is just basic business. And my guess is the players are going to, I don't want to say suffer the consequences, but they'll not be compensated nearly to the level that they think. And I brought this up yesterday, and it's one of the great things that experience brings you in this field. Right? Experience isn't everything, because you can't go, I remember back in 2003 and 2004, we'd be talking baseball right now. We don't do that anymore. And it's not that baseball is not a great sport. It's cool. But in the landscape of what people care about, we've just shifted, and it's all NFL as much as we can all the time. And this is football's offseason is what baseball's offseason used to be. There used to be the hot stove league. Again, go back 20 years, and Theo Epstein went to Thanksgiving dinner with Kurt Schilling, and he reeled in the big shill. And that changed their trajectory altogether. Great big game pitcher. Now the offseason stories are Aaron Rodgers wants to be moved. Before that, Russell Wilson wanted to be moved. Today's story was Devontae Adams. He's a Raider, says Tom Telesco. Right, baseball's offseason used to dominate in the offseason. Now it's really more about football in the offseason and basketball to another extent. So I look at this thing and I'm thinking to myself, there is this thing where you have businessmen, and we all think it's like the owners are making all these decisions. No, it's also presidents and general managers. And they look at it and they're like, okay, so the way in which you don't get squeezed by the players into making a bad decision, what motivates you to sign a bad contract? Usually it's time and leverage or opportunities. So what's literally been done is, and we've kind of seen this a little bit in baseball, but football is different than baseball. The draft is in a different place. Even the NBA, remember, the NBA is the opposite, where you have the draft first, then you have free agency second. In the NFL, you have free agency first, the draft second. So in this case, the leverage is actually on the owner's side right now. Because if you don't want to get anywhere near their number, if you want to play the market and the market tells you you're not worth 14 a year, it's more than 9 or 10 a year, and we keep telling you 9 or 10 a year to stick around here, and they don't want to play ball, they're like, all right, we'll just draft a couple of young running backs, and then we'll get somebody who's on the market for a couple million, and we'll roll with it. I mean, Kansas City Chiefs won 2 straight Super Bowls. They have a first-round draft pick that's a running back, but he's lightly used in comparison to their 7th-round draft pick, Isaiah Pacheco. And even Pacheco, who fumbled, of course, in the Super Bowl, he's imminently replaceable. If he ever stuck his heels in the sand and says, I'm not playing anywhere for less than $14 million, they would say, you're not playing in Kansas City. So I think this is an amazing time in this business. And we're supposed to have sympathy for running backs, and we're told, oh, woe is me. Look, they're still one of the highest paid positions. The game has just evolved to where they're not close to the highest paid position. It's no different than the power forward in the NBA. Charles Oakley has no place in this NBA. None. Charles Oakley has no place in this NBA. Pass first point guards, really very little place in the NBA. Got to be a scorer or at least an elite shooter, as well as being able to defend. Traditional old school. The one that's the easiest one is the traditional big man. That's the running back. Still of value, still needed, still on teams. Most people start with them, but most teams don't finish with them. And Jokic was the first player Warriors didn't have one. Cavs didn't have one. The Warriors had Andrew Bogut when they lost, and Andrew Bogut was a big center, but not somebody a leading scorer who could play with his back to the basket and score at the low post. That he's like a unicorn. And the thing holding many of us back from saying, hey, can you win in the playoffs with Jokic is, can you win in the playoffs with his defense? Because it's really hard when they're playing five guys outside the three-point line and you got a big old 7-foot lumbering center. So most centers are no longer a top 5 draft pick. Case in point, Zach Edey. Zach Edey's 7'3". He's over 300 pounds, and he can really score. And if this was 1995, he would be a top 5 NBA lottery pick. But now, I don't know where he's going to get drafted. Because can you use him? Yeah, but can you win big with him on the court, in the game, in important games? No, can't move. And why is that? Well, it's not just the three-point shot. It's the fact that, and this is the big one, the rules have changed in basketball. Watch low post play. Crazy physical. Right? The reason they can't score down there, and the reason it's such an inefficient shot is you get away with murder. It's just grappling down there. And the reason that downhill players, LeBron and Giannis, even when Giannis can't shoot or LeBron was an average shooter at best, you can't touch a guy when he's facing up on the perimeter. So he gets a running start. You can't do anything to stop him. Right? We tell people are always like, Joel Embiid should get down the low post. No, he shouldn't. Because when you're in low post, you can put an arm bar in the back of somebody's back. It's really hard to score that way. When you're dribbling and facing a guy, you can come downhill full speed. They can't stop you. Well, what's happened in the NFL? None of the rules have changed. They allow for the RPOs because offensive linemen can get like a yard and a half downfield. You cannot touch a wide receiver after 5 yards. Game teams are so spread out, right? Everything's about speed, and you can't touch a quarterback below the knee, above the neck. But inside the tackles, it's the same game. Inside the tackles, it's a lot like playing center in the NBA. Brutally physical. And the NFL, that shortens your career, but also, like, it kind of makes you less effective. So the rules have changed. The sport has changed. They're still really well compensated. They're just not the same. And when NFL teams are basically asking themselves, why should I pay $14 million guaranteed for my running back when I just don't think the market will bear it? So let's put it on the market and see what happens. Let's put it on the market and see what happens. And I've talked about this with Dak Prescott. It probably doesn't happen because his salary cap number is so gigantic now, but you should have done it previously. I believe more teams should do this. The Ravens did it last year, still signed Lamar to a gigantic deal, but the thing was, he could have signed with anybody. They said, hey, find a trade partner. Find somebody who's going to pay you all this money fully guaranteed. Couldn't find one. And that's what NFL teams, and what they're doing is it's all about the timing. If they're all in the market now, By the way, bless you, Dan Byer. Dan Byer, like sneezing fit. That's a bad one. That's at 4 or 5. You okay, Dan? Thumb up. Good. Hate that. I hope you're not getting sick. It is definitely going around. He's at borderline. Most people down at Cedars-Sinai. Dan Byer, he's here for all these hours working. That's toughness.
Has there ever been an illness where people didn't say something's going around? Yeah, it's going around, It
is literally going around.
It's kind of like we need
my
the
kid's
rain.
homesick. Huh? Yeah. I get it. It does. Or also, it's that time of year. You sneeze, you get sick for whatever reason. It's that time of year. People are only allowed to get sick in the winter. Nobody gets sick in the summer? Is there any science behind that? Is it that we're outside more? Is it the heat? I'm not sure. Anyway, let me get back, not lose my train of thought. The point is this. Okay, here's how it works. Again, I'm not telling you I paid attention to every second when I was at the Spears School of Business at the Oklahoma State University, but I did pay attention enough to know that we're told, okay, that the more competition there is, the better business is, the more efficiently it runs because out of necessity. But that efficiency, I don't believe, helps the players. I think it helps the teams. And you got all these running backs out there, and some teams we already got our guys. Some teams half the teams in the league just on principle don't want to spend money on one running back, no matter how good they are. And then you have the draft still as your leverage against these players. And you have multiple guys that are all out there. It's going to be fascinating to see who flinches of the players and signs first, because that will set the market. And if none of them sign, it'll be like musical chairs. Somebody's going to be left without a chair. And the easiest example I can give in how this works is, do you guys know Blake Snell's still unsigned? I was today years old when I knew Blake Snell was not signed. I thought he had a long-term deal with the Padres. I'm not going to lie to you. I was like, well, he's with the Padres, right? And Jay Stu's like, no, he's not signed. Well, aren't they playing preseason games? Yep. And now, look, it's different in baseball because, well, they already had the draft, and there's no young player that can replace Blake Snell. It's not possible. Right? It's also different in baseball in that if you miss time in spring training or in training camp in football, right? You're not under contract in football, but if you are, you can get fined. It's also really hard to put you onto a roster when you're in the NFL. Hey, we kind of already had a team going. But the idea is still the same. Players think, I'm a left-hander. I won the Cy Young Award. I pitched in both leagues, been great in the World Series. Game 7, how good was he for the Rays back in Game 7 against the Dodgers? He was awesome. They had to wait till he came out of the game to win the game. So it's the market. And what's changed in Major League Baseball is, with the exception of Shohei Ohtani, they don't want to have those 10-year deals. Shorter deals, a lot of money up front. And he's holding out, and maybe he'll get somebody who's desperate, or maybe he gets somebody who goes, teams that go we're good. We can't add another $40 million to our payroll. We're good. Maybe the Yankees decide they're not good. Maybe the Dodgers decide they're not good. Maybe the Red Sox decide, hey, we're good. We can give it a shot. Because those are the only teams, are the Cubs, the teams with all that kind of money that'll pay that dollar. But again, you're talking about 4 teams you're waiting on. Same thing will happen in the NFL. I mentioned Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, Austin Eckler, Saquon Barkley. I'm sure I'm missing a couple, but there's 4. Tony Pollard, another one. That's 5. 5. They're all good. Different levels, different ages, probably different, we're up by $4 or $5 million variance. But they're all out there, and they're all being available. Not great. Okay. I'll give you the real example. This is like everybody lists their front row tickets for a concert that you thought you were going to make a bunch of money on StubHub. And nobody's buying the tickets because they're like, I could buy a perfectly good seat for like $150 and you want $1,000 for that same ticket or a slightly better seat? No, I'm going to pass. The running back market is a really, really interesting one to keep an eye on this offseason because last year the owners just, let's try and franchise tag it, figure it out short term. And now the plan is obvious. Let them all in the market. Let's see what the market will bear. And we'll see who blinks first, team or player. And that sets at least some of the precedent for what the rest of the market's going to look like.